because our town engineer is going to be on Zoom for agenda item 6.
Okay.
I was wondering if we could flip-flop 5 and 6 just so that he
Sure.
doesn't have to sit and wait, and we don't have to pay him to sit and wait.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you.
And so far, Terry, do we have more than just the engineer on Zoom, or is there someone else?
That's all for
Anybody else?
Is this a consulting engineer that's for the, okay.
Wonderful. About a minute. And it looks like they fixed the clocks, because they were 5 minutes slow before.
I did.
Yay.
Ken was at this conference too, but I didn't get a chance to say hi, but I went
Oh, that was the Colorado Water Congress?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
very nice. That's always a helpful.
Yeah,
You get to hear what's pending in legislation, what
Yeah.
changes, how they might affect you.
yeah, it's very policy heavy. I mean, it's a little technical, some of the sessions, but it's much more of a policy kind of legislature, kind of that kind of thing. So yeah, it is.
Did they talk about any funding streams at all?
They did, so what I heard generally is that there's a lot of money available, of course, from the federal's governments, bipartisan infrastructure law, Inflation Reduction Act, all that. And so Colorado is trying to figure out how to kind of get their fair share of that, but they're still working it. I mean, there's some stuff that's specifically dedicated to Colorado, or at least Colorado River stuff, but they're also just trying to figure out how to get like municipalities, grants and
Good.
low interest loans and stuff from it, so.
Wonderful.
I think we're right at 6:01 here. Okay. So with that, call the meeting to order at 6:01 PM. Welcome to the August 24th meeting of the Town of Berthoud Planning Commission. It's the tradition of the Planning Commission to start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alright, thank you. Okay, with that, Clerk Rieger, will you please call the roll?
Chairperson Anderson,
Present.
Vice Chairperson Kurtz,
Present?
Secretary Van Bentham.
Here.
Commissioner Feldbush.
Here.
Commissioner Semadalis.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
And Commissioner Wade.
Like I said, we have a full house. It's laudable, first time in quite a while. And I wanna welcome Nick, it's his first meeting.
Thank you. I'll introduce myself. Yeah, so new in the neighborhood, about a year, and originally from the Chicago area. And my daughter brought us out here, had a baby, and another one on the way, so here we are.
So grandpa twice,
Yes, on the way.
wonderful. Sounds good. Well, we don't have any public here with us, no one else on Zoom except for the engineer, okay. So I would say that copies of the agenda are in front of you on the podium, but there's no one here to really take one, so we all should have muted our cell phones by now. Alright, so should I go through what we normally go through? Read that out? Do we need to?
It's up to you. There isn't anyone here and there isn't anyone online.
Alright, so I won't go through our introductory comments about the planning commission then. Just say that we have staff in attendance tonight that will provide us with presentations on the agenda items and answer our questions and work with the planning commission regarding those two items dealing with the municipal code. Okay. Cuts out what I think I would say. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes for the August 10th meeting. Does anyone have anything they want to amend, change, substitute in those minutes? Okay, if not, then I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second?
So moved in a second, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye, all right, so that motion passes, our agenda is approved for August 10th. All right, tonight we have two items to be heard. Staff will introduce each item with us and then follow with a staff presentation. There's really no applicant for this, so we, after the staff presentation, we'll open a public hearing. If there are, listen to any public comments that we may have, and then we'll close the public hearing for each of those items. Okay, and with that, Ann Best Johnson, Community Development Director, introduce our first item.
Thank you, and Madam Chair, if I may request that our agenda be slightly amended to move to flip-flop items 6 and 5 out of respect for the time our town engineer is on Zoom, and I just didn't want him to have to sit through agenda item 5. So if then he can be dismissed and go on with his evening, if
So
that's all
items-
right to amend the agenda.
Item 6 becomes item 5, and 5 becomes 6.
Yes, please.
Any objection to that, commissioners?
No.
All right, let's do that.
Thank you. So this evening, a little bit of history. Well, here we have, just for members of the audience, and a reminder, this is a slightly different flow when we amend the code. Staff will make a presentation, and code amendments can come from various sources. It can be staff driven by there's confusion in the code by the public, or a reorganization, or we have noticed that there is a deficiency or a correction that's needed. A code amendment can be generated from you all. It could also come from the town board of trustees or a member of the public, the development community. Somebody could realize there's just something not right or confusing, and they can bring it to our attention, and then we will amend the code accordingly. So then again, this is a public hearing because we are talking about the land use code. The public is invited to participate. This was noticed in the paper. It has to be noticed about a month before the hearing, so it was noticed. And then after the presentation on each of the agenda items, then you all can discuss after taking public testimony. There's going to be a lot of dialogue back and forth with staff, but you can also ask that during the presentation. But just wanted to put this on the record that this is the process that we're following. So then the next item, so the yellow line on this map illustrates the current town of Berthoud future growth boundary. The parcels that are in red, or the land mass that's in red, that is land that is in the town of Berthoud. You can see the floodplain and floodway designations there. The floodway is the area that's in gray with a darker blue cross hatch. The area that's right next to that, that's dark blue and green, that is the floodplain or the flood fringe. It's either a 100-year chance of flood or a 500-year chance of flood. And then yellow is also 100 years. So this represents both Larimer County and Weld County's flood overlay zones. Now, if you all were here in 2013, you know that there was a big flood. It did impact the Little Thompson. And as an outcome of that flood, the State of Colorado Water Conservation Board assisted communities and flew the flood area and took LIDAR data, which is data that's based on topography, and it shows where that flood went to. Because prior to flood events, FEMA would make maps based on local intelligence. So it could be as simple as a farmer meeting with FEMA saying, when it floods, it comes to this point. And so it wasn't really based on science, but it was based on environmental patterns. But with the LIDAR data, then the Colorado Water Conservation Board was able to get some true data. So both Weld County and Larimer County updated their floodplain maps based on that data. During the time that they updated that, which was the town of Berthoud then adopted the floodplain maps on January 12th, 2021. So Berthoud adopted the most current maps that FEMA has produced because that's the best available data. Now, one of the things that normally comes along with adopting a floodplain map is a code to say if you have property within one of these designated areas, this is how you shall develop or not develop these in these different zones. That's something that Berthoud just didn't do, and it's okay that Berthoud didn't do it, we're not in trouble. It's just this tonight completes that picture. It's now providing code that goes along with the map. Excuse me. So again, notice was published and that notice was provided in your packet materials. And the Colorado Water Conservation Board has a model code. And that code is based on, they are the designated agency from FEMA to regulate the flood regulations in the state of Colorado. And so they've developed a model flood mitigation code. And this was used to create our code. I just changed a lot of things in there from municipality to town of Berthoud. And, corrected it from county commissioners to town board of trustees. So small changes like that were made to the model code. After I made those changes, I worked with CWCB staff. They reviewed the code and they gave us a report card, and that's also in your packet as well. And Noah Nemers from Baseline is our town engineer. He also reviewed this to make sure that, as the floodplain administrator, that he understood this code and didn't think anything seemed out of line for what's happening in Berthoud. So you can see on this map, we don't have a lot in Berthoud now, but we will have some as Berthoud continues to grow on the south side of Highway 56. And then when you cross over into Weld County on the north side of the highway there. So the town passed the maps, and we're also required to have this code. And the reason why this code is required is to help mitigate any damage that would be caused by development in the floodplain floodway. And we have to have this code in order to participate in the National Flood Insurance Rate Program. So if we don't have the code and something happens, then potentially Berthoud residents would not be able to receive flood insurance. So it's important that we just follow this up and finish the cycle that was started and very, very nicely adopted in 2021. I did reach out to Larimer County and Weld County, and when they were going through the process of adopting the new maps, they did reach out to all of the property owners at that moment in time. The town of Berthoud, I know, also reached out to some of the property owners that were in town. So public outreach did occur with the mapping, and then we did advertise the hearing tonight in the paper about a month ago that this was happening. So I think with that, that is all on the flood code that I have prepared for a presentation. So I'm here to answer any questions, and Noah is also present to answer any questions that you may have. Commissioner Kurtz and others that may have a technical background, I'm glad Noah's on the phone.
Does Noah have anything he wants, preliminary remarks he wants to make at this point?
Noah, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
He's not on there now.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what happened.
We'll wait for him to get back.
Did you ever see him? I never saw him on the.
Was he there, Terry?
He was on there
I've just gotten kicked off.
briefly.
The wonders of Zoom. I do have a comment or a question, but I'll wait for Noah to get on
Okay.
there.
Do we have any non-technical questions we want to ask at this point?
I do.
Mhm.
I
Go
was-
ahead.
If this is a silly question, I apologize. Is that the little Thompson that runs through?
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
That is a Little Thompson, and then the confluence of the Little Thompson and the Big Thompson is just southwest of Evans.
And is it technically a river?
Yes.
Okay.
Not like an East Coast, not like a Midwest coast. We do,
Not the Mississippi, but yes, it is a river.
yeah, in Ohio, we might have called it a creek, but it is a river, the mighty Little Thompson. Yeah, and I guess just for context, just because I was doing a little research, I think some of the biggest flooding on the Little Thompson, at least relative to Berthoud, was, so if you know where the railroad tracks are, right, there's a culvert, or, the river kind of flows underneath. So during the 2013 flood, there was a significant backup there and significant damage to the infrastructure there. So I know that as part of the recovery effort from the 2013 flood, I believe that there was essentially increased capacity added there. So hopefully that's been rectified. But I think that's where the bulk of the damage was. Not to take away from any of the property damage and just general flooding that occurred, but
So the fire stations, isn't it right there?
Let's look further south.
this was more south of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know.
It's kind of just south of Heritage Ridge, southeast of Heritage Ridge. So.
And where Spartan would come through, punch through to First, it's south of that area, correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Is it down by that farm over there?
It is, yeah. There's a farm just to the south of Heritage Ridge, and then so on the east side of that farm is where that crossing is.
And as you can see, the areas that are in red, though, that is Berthoud proper, the municipal boundaries of Berthoud. So a lot of the floodplain and floodway is on the outside of Berthoud. But again, you need to adopt the map and then you need to adopt the regulations. It's kind of like the zoning map. It's the flood zones and you have to have regulations that govern how you operate in the different zoning districts.
Just to verify, any of the requirements or recommendations within the code, that's all for new development, correct? So anything
Correct.
that applies to anything that's existing?
Exactly, yeah, if a floodplain changed, got bigger, there's FEMA recognizes some grandfathering in that, but no, this would not impact, but I mean, if the floodplain does get bigger and you want to develop, even though you had your parcel before, new development would have to comply with the new regulations and the new mapping.
Even if you have, is there a threshold under which it doesn't apply? Like if I've got a house and I want to put a deck on it or something, I mean, is there some floor under which it doesn't apply?
That's a great question, and I believe the flood regulations are pretty strict, so if you built a home and now it was encumbered by the new floodplain regulations, you can do a conditional letter of map revision or a CLOMAR, and then a letter of map revision, a LOMAR, and you can petition to have that taken out with engineering recommendations and engineering proof that it wasn't in the floodway or the floodplain. But I don't believe you can make improvements to property to add to the problem. Now, you could probably add a deck onto a house that was, on the side of the house that wasn't in the floodplain.
So basically the onus would be on the landowner to accommodate whatever requirements or apply for some relief. But there is potentially some impact to existing landowners.
There's potential impact to existing landowners when the map was adopted 2 years ago.
Right.
And now we just have regulations to help them figure out how to navigate that impact.
And do you get the sense that the FEMA communication with the property owners was successful and that they felt like they were able to get across if someone was suddenly in a floodplain or suddenly in a 500-year floodplain versus a 100-year floodplain or something?
Well, that's what I'm hoping. I spoke with both engineering and planning departments, and I know Weld County had a series of community open houses and that they sent letters to everyone that was impacted. And that process was like the DFIRM process. You may have heard of that. And Larimer County Engineering told me that they also had community open houses and talked to folks. And so that was between 2019, 2021. Weld County is still communicating today as well. So that's what was told to me.
And who's gonna administer, who's the person that would administer this particular code?
So NOAA is as the town engineer, is also our certified floodplain manager. So we will create an application form and we'll create that process to go along with it. But, you know, since adopting the maps and today, there hasn't been any issues, so we didn't feel as if it was absolutely emergent that we had a form ready to go after your meeting tonight. But we will develop those forms.
Well, I guess I could make my comment, and if Noah does show up, I'll repeat it. But this is almost more, I think John likes to say this a lot, like for putting it in the record. I don't think it needs to change anything, but so recently, like in the Northeast in Vermont, you know, they've had some very significant flooding that was not captured by FEMA maps, and you know that I think is due to a number of reasons. Could be because of changing climate, more extremes, just missed. But kind of talking about, you know, more extremes happening and hydrologic variability, I don't think it would, like I said, result in any changes tonight, but I guess just maybe asking NOAA or the town to kind of keep that in mind, because what we see here as the 500-year flood outline or footprint, so to speak, is based off of historical hydrology. I guess I'll say that, and not necessarily the hydrology we'll experience in the next 100 years. So, so I know that this is, you know, kind of the state of the industry, but just kind of keep in mind that it might not be keeping up with changing hydrology we're going to see. So.
Yep, and that's a really good point. And in the comprehensive plan update, it talks about preserving special areas, the riparian areas, the special habitat areas, and that follows with the floodplain and the floodway. Definitely, there's absolutely no development that can occur in the floodway, and people can develop in the floodplain, but again, they go through that CLOMAR and LOMAR process through FEMA. We don't necessarily want to have a process in the town of Berthoud. However, we would want to see what their application materials are and work with that developer. They may have to do a CLOMAR or a LOMAR to do a pedestrian bridge or putting any kind of obstruction in that area, but we would not allow people to utilize their property if it was designated for a floodplain to put in a subdivision.
So if I could just clarify, so these slashes are all floodway, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you just said if they haven't already done it, they're prohibited from building on
Yes,
that?
yes.
Period.
By FEMA.
So like if somebody owns a pretty good chunk of land over there in the red, by County Road 7 and Highway 56, they just won't be able to develop that unless they get a variance or amendment?
They can't have a variance or amendment. They would need to go, if a property owner believed that they are not, that FEMA map is incorrect, they would have to go through an engineering process with FEMA to do a conditional letter of map revision or a letter of map revision to have their property removed from that designation. But this is a designation that both Weld and Larimer counties have approved by working with FEMA, working with the property owners. And in fact, there are some properties in Berthoud on the west side that actually did go through a CLOMAR process just last year, I believe, and had some of their property removed from the floodplain and floodway. So it is possible to do map revisions.
That's a chunk of land, that's in that red area, that's, I don't know if it's 100 acres, but it's, wow.
Just to be really specific, so would it be prohibited that they develop, or just that if they develop, they wouldn't be included in the flood insurance program?
So, okay, we could not allow development in the floodway, floodplain if we wanted everybody within Berthoud to have the ability to get flood insurance
Oh, I see.
and to participate in the recovery
So we would be kind of disqualified if we were to allow people to develop in floodways.
Yes. Yep, and in both Larimer and Weld County, they don't allow development in the floodway. You can do some development in the floodplain, but you have to do it through a flood hazard development permit process or a letter of map revision or a conditional letter of map revision. So now let's say those individuals had a subdivision, they can utilize that area for their open space requirements. You can have floodway and floodplain on somebody's lot, but then you just put the building envelope outside of that area. So it's not saying you just can't use your entire property, you just can't use that property that's encumbered by those designations.
Did this effort drive any, you mentioned the crossing at the railroad track, and we went through this in Longmont years ago too. That always kind of wants to stack up at the crossings, roads, bridges, that sort of thing. Is this driving any of that kind of work as like a required course of action, you know?
No. This is the only reason why we're adopting this code or proposing to adopt this code is that we have a map, but we don't have a way to tell people what are we doing with this map and how we are going to manage future development or, you know, lack of development in this area. So the adoption of the map and the adoption of this code could lead to, I mean, that's like data-based decision making. We could say, hey, we have a problem with this road or a culvert or a bridge. It's designated as floodway area. We witnessed problems in 2013, or we even witnessed problems when it rains really heavily. So that notification and recognition of a problem could lead to budget considerations and putting a project on a priority list.
So it informs, but it doesn't require.
Exactly. Yep.
So if a farm was on a floodway, or a floodplain, they can still farm it, they just can't build anything on it.
Correct.
What other uses would be permissible in that in a floodplain? Obviously, I was thinking the same thing about farm, but what would be something else that would be permissible?
You know, grazing, farming, agricultural production, as long as you're not raising that base flood elevation or that ground, you just can't raise the ground by putting fill or berming or putting anything in that area that's going to obstruct the flow of floodwater. So they don't even like fences in the floodway because they catch big stuff that flows down, and fences could also be caught by the water and be pulled downstream and be an obstruction.
To Commissioner Kurtz's point about the future hydrology of the region, I remember when we were having the work session on water resources with the town board, there was some discussion of how the town uses future climate scenarios for water resource planning. Has there been any conversation about using that for flood mapping or any way forward with that?
No, because we get our mapping straight from FEMA.
Yeah.
The town isn't doing any mapping of our own.
Yeah.
So if there would be a really big rain event that precipitated our need to reevaluate this map, we would work directly with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And they do have some funding available perhaps to help us with something like that. Yeah, but we look to them as our guide because is Noah back on? We look to them as our guide. I mean, Noah is an absolutely wonderful engineer, but he's also looking at other things, and other communities are looking at other engineering projects in the community. So we look to Colorado Water Conservation Board as kind of helping us lead when there is a problem, and we also look to FEMA and their mapping products to help lead us when there is a problem. But those are very good questions, and they're incredibly valid, especially even with the rain in Southern California last week and on the East Coast, and things are changing.
Yeah, it's all statistics driven, right? So these are 100-year flood event, so it's a probability of 500-year flood event. So if we get something that's more intense than 500, folks may be tempted to say, well, that was a 1,000-year flood event. But is it actually the new 500-year flood event? You just don't know because it's changing too fast for you to actually run the statistics over a long period of time.
I used to work for an insurance company and it's very similar with insurance. You predict hail pattern, weather patterns. And we had for 10 years straight a 1 in 100-year event. So
Periods are.
Yeah.
I risk taker, yeah.
Not great.
So you're
Let's get a marker board and start writing out statistics.
Yeah, and another thing, Colorado Water Conservation Board, I'm sure they were a big part of the Colorado Water Congress. But they do offer training events. They are sending out sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly updates. Through our participation with them, they're going to keep us informed of emerging trends that we have to watch out for.
And that would allow for you to make changes in the map and in the procedures here, so.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of science that goes behind creating one of these maps. And we realize we are impacting people's property. So that's why the town isn't going out and making these maps. We're relying on, the state and the national government to help create these maps. And even the counties, we're relying on them.
These people who own the property in this floodway were notified.
According to Weldon Larimer County, they notified everybody in the unincorporated portions of the county that this was happening. I have not been able to find evidence that in the properties in Berthoud were notified by my predecessor, but I've been told that notification most likely did occur, but I haven't been able to find proof of mailing.
if there was a lien or insurance on the property, there would have been additional communication from other organizations as well, because it impacts them as well. They use these same
Who would
maps.
put the lien on a flood?
If they have a mortgage, I'm saying, the lien holder wants to be aware
Okay,
of this, so
like
they,
title insurance would show up.
for like your mortgage or something, whether you're applying, they're also notified when the FEMA maps are changed. So then they can address that.
Well, and you're exactly right, and you raise a really good point, because if you're trying to get a mortgage with property, even if a little bit is in the floodway or floodplain, you may have to have that flood insurance.
So, assuming this is approved, is there some notification that would go to homeowners so they know that they can avail themselves of the National Flood Insurance Program, or that's a?
Well, it's like Commissioner Feldbush was indicating, I think if they have property that's in the floodplain or floodway, they have to carry insurance. And that is something that that their mortgage company would require. And so what having this code allows people is a method of either going through that CLOMAR or LUMAR process, and a method of communicating if they should develop a portion of the property outside the floodway or floodplain, how do we do so?
I was thinking people who may have existing homes that sell them.
Know when a
Buy or-
transaction occurs and.
Yeah.
That would
That's
also
when they may
be
find out.
flagged and come up during that process.
So they would be notified in the process.
It seems like we've approved some neighborhoods that are extremely close to this. 'Cause,
So for example, the Ludlow
I
project.
don't remember it showing up, but perhaps it did.
Yeah, it did. The Ludlow project on the south side of the property, in the neighborhood master plan, the floodplain went through the project and separated the homes that they were proposing at that time to be larger estate homes are on the south side of the floodplain line. And then that north half then were the higher density properties. So that was, and then they utilize, and it might not have been called out for attention because they were utilizing that, for example, their natural areas.
Or drainage.
Right, drainage,
ponds or-
they're, yeah,
okay.
exactly. So they're using it as a site amenity.
Okay.
and there were gonna be trails and I think a pedestrian bridge over that. Does that like get,
If they can get approval.
I was gonna say, does it actually get messy? It's like, oh, we'd like to put a bridge there so folks can get to that side of the neighborhood. But
Yeah, and oftentimes, the Army Corps of Engineers will get involved and can you even put structure in waters of the US?
Right.
So it just gets complicated.
Yeah, for a footbridge. But yeah, I gotcha.
Well, don't discourage that footbridge, I think that'd be fun.
Well, no, I'm pro footbridge. But yeah, it just, when you try to have these inclusive codes or,
Yeah.
not necessarily at our level, but at like the Army Corps level, then yeah, they can't possibly think of everything like the footbridge in Berthoud,
Yep. Or maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I understand if you don't know the answer to this, and since we're missing the engineer too, but what's up with Newell Lake? I mean, there are plenty of reservoirs in Berthoud. Why is this one in particular a concern? Because I've actually noticed standing water in that area before, and it kind of makes me curious.
I don't know the answer to that, but we will find out and the
I'm
next
just
time
wondering.
Extra
we'll-
flat.
Yeah, and it could just be, Newell Lake could be a drainage, like where a lot of drainage falls to
Yeah.
in the Berthoud area, and so it has a higher propensity of, flood likelihood or even just exceeding the banks of the lake.
Mhm.
But I will find out for you
I was just
and
curious.
that's okay.
Pretty sure that's where that farm has all that standing water. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah,
that's
it's
what I was
constantly
thinking.
standing water.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it must all like drain there.
Yeah, but I'll find out for you. He must be having internet
Mhm.
issues, so
We don't need him to officially make a motion though, right?
no.
Is anyone, are we finished discussing, are we ready for motions?
Let's just for the record, let's open it up to public
Yeah, okay,
comment.
sorry. All right. So, almost was ready to skip it, then we have to do it again, right?
With the ghost.
That would not be fun. All right, so at this point, are we ready to open up for public hearing? Are we good with that? All right, so open the floor up for public comment. If you'd like to speak, please come to the lectern and state your name and address. Okay.
And let the record show, Madam Chair, that no one is present either on Zoom, in the audience, and no one has signed up on the sign-in sheet.
No one has walked in and walked up to the lectern. So, all right, so with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Ready for motions? Do you have more discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think the discussion we had was good. I don't, in terms of like the actual motion, I think it's fine as is. I don't even think we need to like document it as like a, recommend, but I would just, you were talking about like grant opportunities from CWCB to kind of look at changing hydrology impacts. I just would encourage town to keep an eye on that, so.
I'm curious about the process you just mentioned, so we don't officially have to state the motion?
No, you do have to state the motion, but I think Commissioner Kurtz was saying we don't have to state in the motion that we stay on top of CWCB and changing conditions, and that is a given,
Yeah,
that we
yeah,
will do that.
Yeah, I just kind of making the point, so I'm comfortable with the motion as is, I guess. But anybody else has?
I would entertain a motion with regard to this item.
All right, well, I will move to forward a recommendation of approval of the Town of Berthoud Flood Damage Prevention Code as Section 12 to Chapter 30 of the Municipal Code to the Board of Trustees. This recommendation of approval is outlined in the attached ordinance and includes supporting the National Flood Insurance Rate Program and protecting the Flood Overlay District in the Town of Berthoud.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
John seconds. All right, with that, Clerk Rieger, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Wing,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kurtz,
Yes.
Secretary Van Bentham,
Yes.
Commissioner Feldbush, Commissioner Semadalis,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Chairperson Anderson.
Yes. Yay,
I
unanimous.
always go last except when there's a yes, they start with me.
You always start with me.
Alright, so that brings us to what is now number 6. You do the circle heading.
Thank you. So we're gonna go through the same, I have up here for any audience members that might be here. Let the record show that there is a slide that illustrates the process this evening. All right, so going on to the next. So what you have in your packet, you will see items that are in strikeout, which means we're proposing to delete. Items that are in red line or underlined, which are items we're proposing to add. And this tonight is the first of 3 to 5 code modifications that you're going to see over the next 6 to 8 months. There's the town comprehensive plan is an state award winning and recognized comprehensive plan. And so our code needs to be amended in order to reflect the vision and values found in the comprehensive plan. There are also things in our land use code that are confusing. And sometimes you just need to make a tweak. So tonight, for the large part, we are making some minor tweaks, and then we are making a couple of bigger tweaks. So we're gonna go through that. And in section 1 and 2, they are related. We have the site plan process is an administrative process. If there is a land use in the zoning code, there's a land use table. And that land use table says these types of uses are allowed by right through the site plan process. Then on the table, it also has uses that are a little bit more intense. For example, the caring pathways that came before you, the pet crematorium, that was a use that was identified as appropriate in that zone district, but because of the slightly more intense use, you all and the town trustees at some time in history said that those uses they wanted to have through a conditional use process. So things like, I don't even know what to tell you. There are lots of land uses that are allowed in the town. Some go through the site plan process, which is administrative, and some come before you and the town trustees for a land use hearing. Both processes, we notify surrounding property owners. Both processes, I have people post a sign on their property as well. So the public is notified. With any item that comes before you and comes before the town board of trustees, we also publish it in the newspaper. So for hearing items, the public is notified 3 different ways. For administrative processes, the public is notified 2 different ways. And the only difference is that if it comes to you in a public hearing, it's published in the paper. So the sign posting on the property as well as a mailed notice happen with either one of these 2 processes because people need to know what's going on around them. Okay, so the big change for the site plan review. What I've provided in your packets, sometimes you'll see, oh, well, it skips. Here we have on page 1 of 15, we're talking about site plans. So, I mean, a lot of this is, you know, I'm just adding in here, it's a review process, it's a prerequisite to obtaining these items, and that the site plan is in accordance with the land use table contained in the zoning section of this chapter. Just to clarify, where do you look? Do I need a site plan? And it's in that table. The site plan review process shows how the lot will be developed to ensure the site design will be in compliance with, and I added, instead of just stopping with all town regulations and this code, I'm stating the development code and all overlay districts, standards and specification, and the master plan affecting the property, because that narrows it down a little bit more to what they need to adhere to. Then the site plan process on B1, this states how site plans are processed. Now, I didn't include A through E on there, But starting with F, we're having a lot of challenges from a staff level with people not providing final landscape plans, not providing water consumptive use analysis. And then when we provide people with approval, even the site plan and the special use permit, the developer is going to give that landscape plan to a contractor, and then that contractor is oftentimes responsible for watering and maintaining. And a lot of times contractors just might not know how to water and maintain even native areas with grasses. And so we're asking them to provide us with a maintenance plan now so that we can make sure that they know how they're going to maintain their landscaping in a healthy manner.
So in some of these are maybe status quo, but you're stating them in here, and others are new things.
Exactly. And so we like to get those from developers, and we have been asking for them from developers. So now we're just memorializing this is an expectation. And then we have the town has discovered that there are a lot of backflow meters and other meters that were never, that they were installed without paying for the water. And so we are calling them, we are calling these rogue meters because a developer might have, and completely innocently, their contractor went out, bought a meter, installed the meter, hooked onto town non-potable or town potable water, and have been irrigating their open space without paying for it. It happens, and we've discovered over 100 of these this year. And so now what we're going to ask for is on that landscape plan, we wanna see where their meter is going to go and where all the backflow preventers will go. Because then we can give that that outlot address, we can let our team know where those meters are, and then there are no questions and everybody knows, congratulations, you get to pay, you use and pay for the water. But that is a problem that we've had, so this is a solution community development has developed with the public works and the utilities departments to try to minimize this from perpetuating. The final irrigation plan, right now, some developers are not providing an irrigation plan. We need to see that plan in order to determine how much raw water or water they would need to bring to the project. So we're just asking for an irrigation plan now. That hydrozone analysis has been something that people just have been giving us because we need size taps and everything, but now we're just gonna formalize it. It's in the subdivision regulations, so we're gonna bring it on over to site planning as well. And then it's just renumbering what was G to I. And then J is as a development sign plan. For example, you have a big commercial development or even a multifamily apartments building development. We'd like to see a unified sign plan to know what is the lighting, how are they gonna make things look good. So it's not just a bunch of random uncoordinated signs. We'd like to see some uniformity. And then just on item number 2, it says that submit the required number of copies of the application to the town clerk. We're just saying to the town. Really, it's the planning department that receives those items, and we were just putting in their town instead of town clerk to avoid any confusion. If Christian wants to receive all development applications, he can go for it. That would be fantastic, but we're just gonna clarify it goes to the town. Then following, so we're still in the site plan process. So there's a lot of things that you'll notice that have been added is because the site plan process really wasn't very clear. So we've just added a lot of clarity, just stating, you know, we're gonna send it out to referral agencies. It was silent before, but that's what we did. So now we're just putting it in the code that yes, that's what we do. And that we do we review the application materials. that the applicant addresses staff comments and they shall make any necessary changes to the application materials. So it's not just the site plan, which some people then would equate to the map, but it could be the narrative, it could be a grading plan or a drainage report or the traffic impact study, that it's just all materials would need to be amended. The development agreement, this is something in the past that the town went away from asking for development agreements, because again, the town code is really good. And so if you want to develop in the town of Berthoud, you follow what's in the town code. This is what you have to do. We have found that working with a development community, that sometimes having a development agreement is actually a good thing. Because it's the developer is making a commitment to this is how they shall develop, and the town is recognizing that commitment. And there might even be some times where the town decides to take over maintenance of a park or a sidewalk, and we'll do some partnership. And so it's just good to memorialize that in the development agreement, and then there are no questions for the future. And then we added in here just post-approval actions. So after a site plan is approved, it's recorded, when people can pull a building permit, and then the application process conclusion we have in here is that they shall satisfy all conditions of approval and provide adequate information to town staff. Once the materials have been completed to the satisfaction of staff and in accordance with the approval, the applicant shall finalize a development agreement and shall provide materials requested by staff for recording with the records of the county clerk and recorder. This is another issue that has been a challenge, and it's been very frustrating because the town hasn't been recording administrative actions such as site plans, and it makes it really difficult now to go back through files and you have 10 versions and they're all within a couple days of each other and not a one is signed. We don't know what the final version is and we have to guess. And guessing isn't a good thing when it comes to development. So we're just stating it here that we're gonna record those documents. You can see in item number 6, or C, on page 2 of 15 here, the items that are crossed out, that is the old site plan review criteria. And if you read through that, a lot of that criteria is just standard criteria. Does the proposed building meet setbacks? Well, they'd have to do that anyway. And so we wanted to go ahead and add some criteria for approval that was a little bit more meaningful and that reflected the comprehensive plan and the goals for the town of Berthoud, such as, are the application materials complete? The proposed land use will satisfy all provisions of the zoning code, the overlay districts, and the subdivision regulations. That it's going to conform to the comprehensive plan, that the proposed land use will be adequately served by schools, by water, by utilities. That the proposed use will not substantially alter the basic character of the neighborhood or the district. That it's going to result in efficient traffic circulation. That any potential negative impacts of the proposed land use on the rest of the neighborhood have been mitigated through setbacks, through architecture, screening, landscaping, site arrangements, or other methods. This allows staff, we had for example a drive-through car wash come through, and we've been just working with them through now the building permit process. Well, their headlights were angled in such a way that they would shine right into surrounding property owners' back doors. So we had them move around some landscaping to provide an evergreen screen so that that could help stop some of the headlights. Well, yes, is this something that we would have done anyway? Of course we did, but having it in the code, it provides the applicants with an expectation that we are going to hold you accountable for these standards. And even though staff deploys those standards, it's just good to be able to be transparent and explain what our expectations for development are in Berthoud. And that the applicant has submitted evidence that all applicable local, state, and federal regulations, will be followed, such as if somebody needed an EPA permit or a Colorado air pollution permit, that they would get that. With drainage, that they are going to be getting their stormwater management plans filed with the state, et cetera. But just, again, holding others accountable. And then we crossed something out, amendments to approved site plans, that such amendment shall require planning commission review and approval to become effective. Well, what if it is just moving something around, very, very small? We didn't want people to have to come to planning commission for small amendments. So that was site plans. So we can talk about site plans, or we can talk about section 2, which are conditional use permits, or now they're gonna be called special use permits, because a lot of the changes are exactly the same. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
You may have, so is it necessary that we go through every single item that's read that has been lined? And
No.
I'm just asking the question, I don't know if
No,
anybody else.
we don't have to do that, but I wanted to, yeah, so if you don't have
Page
any,
five.
okay, if you don't have any questions, I just want to be,
Yeah.
I would much rather be transparent with you all so that you knew what you were looking at tonight. But if you don't have any questions, we can skip over something, but I was trying to err on the side of
You
conservatism.
are so professional and so thorough, you can't do anything but appreciate and respect that,
Okay,
but
well, I'm gonna slip some stuff in next time now.
There we go. I like that.
The staff meeting shall be held in, at
And
Disneyland.
part of this
Well,
All
is,
checks
Why don't
been
we-
made to director.
lawyers are usually engaged in redlining and things like that, so.
Yes, so I did this work, but our attorney, I am a nerd and I love to write code. But our attorney did review this. So Aaron reviewed it, I talked about it with Chris Kirk, and I talked about all of this with other department heads as well. So it's not just Anne sitting alone in her office and ooh, let's do this. But no, it has been properly vetted.
With that in mind, do we want to say, just go through a section or a subject matter area and say, okay, are there any questions about
Okay,
that
that's
subject
fine.
matter?
I'm completely open, but again, I just don't, I want to be transparent.
No, we appreciate that. I totally
Okay.
appreciate that.
All right,
Being someone who reads regulations all day long, I totally appreciate that.
Okay. Right. So are there any questions on section 1?
No.
All right, so how,
I do have a question on section 1.
yes,
As you were talking about a lot of stuff, and I brought this up about other things before, and sometimes I've been told we just don't have the resources to do some of those things. So when you talked about the 100 people, and the water issues, what about enforcement? I assume when these water situations arose, there should have been some inspection that was done properly. I'm just wondering about literally the enforcement of these things.
right, great question. I don't know the response to that. I don't know why this happened. But luckily, we've got great team members now that are finding these things this year. Last year was what I've been told is the moment of discovery that, oh my goodness, this is going on. This year has been the year of, and we're gonna find out where this is happening. And then we are developing now, working with operations and utilities, we're developing that process to try to better get a handle on all of this. And then we're developing workflows, and lots of people will have their hands in this issue. I think it is a matter of hot potato. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of people that need to touch this issue, and how are we going to best deal with it? So we're taking it by the horns and dealing with it.
And my other question is, we have the comprehensive plan and we want the municipal code to align with the comprehensive plan. Who kind of said, hey, it doesn't, so let's start digging into this? What was the flag, or what was the motivation behind doing the work? I
In
know
the
that's a general question, but I'm just curious.
No, that's a great question. So, and we don't write code just for the sake of writing code because it is very labor intensive. So for the past 6 months that I've been with the town of Berthoud, I just realized there's some things that are a little rusty and could use some polish and clarity. And in working with the development community, I would ask them questions about, hey, do you really understand this? So that I could better understand, maybe it was just me, you know, but
You drove this?
yes, yeah,
Very good.
because it needs to be fixed.
I have a question, I don't know if it necessarily pertains to these changes, but when we talk about the notification, whether it's what we're doing here or the board meetings, I'm just curious if any other communities are finding additional ways for outreach beyond just posting a sign and in the newspaper.
Yeah, so when I've worked for other communities in the county, this is kind of what we get when it comes to code as well. Because it is very exciting. But the nice thing about everything that we're doing, for the large part, reflects back on the vision and values in the comprehensive plan. And there was so much community outreach during that process that, you know, I'm not going to have an open house to say, hey, come and learn about what we're proposing in the code when it's mostly cleanup work. Now, if we were creating a new zone district, or if we were rezoning part of the community, of course, we would be reaching out to the individuals that would be impacted by that. It wouldn't be right if we didn't. But this is just really clarifying language, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily thinking of just these code changes, I'm just saying in general. And the only reason I'm bringing it up because it came up in the board meeting this week about how can we improve our communication so the citizens who may live outside of these areas but have a passion for what's going on are aware of kind of what's going on and that don't read the newspaper. If that's literally the only way they are able to find notification or be notified. There's so many ways to reach out to people nowadays. I'm just curious why it's just the newspaper is the solution, I guess.
Yep, so if there is something really important, we can post it on social media. I know the town has some robust followers on social media. We can do that. If there needed to be a special work session on a particular issue, we can have a work session and invite the community, or even just have workshops and invite the community to that. I've had success with workshops. I've had success having like a Teams platform workshop. Sometimes we'll even get in the schools and do meetings in a box with the school kids and send flyers home in their Friday folders. So there are lots of different ways we can reach the community, but it just depends on what the subject is and who our target audience is, how best to find them and get them to participate.
Does the town have the resources to do additional marketing, I guess? For just regular social media posts that the planning commission has a meeting tonight, here's the agenda on all social media platforms.
I mean, we could set, just like what they do for the town trustees is, hey, the trustees are having a meeting tonight, check out their agenda here. I mean, we can do that for planning commission if you're wanting that to happen.
I'm just curious, and I'm not saying it needs to go in here, it's just you mentioned a couple things that specifically said the newspaper, and I'm just thinking to myself, there's more than just the
Yes.
newspaper.
Yeah, and the newspaper is our legal, we have to do that in the newspaper. And that is in the code that we have to publish in the paper. So that's why I talk about it in a hearing as I'm setting up the case saying, we have sent out surrounding property owner notice because that's in the code. We have posted a sign because that's in the code, and we have published it in the newspaper because those are our legal channels of alerting the public. And so there are other ways that we could do as well. We've just been going through the legal channels that we have to do for public hearings.
So if there was from the top down to come down that the new legal process is you needed to do these additional, then we would look at adopting that into the code.
Definitely,
Okay.
yeah, and a lot of the publication comes from state statute as well, what is absolutely required, like the annexation process, so.
And there's lots of case law on what's adequate notice and what's targeted to reach the most number of people. And, you know, so some of probably what the state law is based on are is that type of litigation, you know, stemming from constitutional due process. So you probably could do extra things, but there's probably certain things that from a legal standpoint you absolutely have to do because of how courts have defined what is adequate notice. And so you could do other things, like I said, you could probably do extra things, but you couldn't eliminate probably some of those other things.
Right, and we do post the agendas at the bulletin board at the front of the town hall as well. So if somebody lived outside that referral zone, or somebody doesn't have access to a newspaper, that we're trying to reach people in as many different ways as we can. But like what Chair Anderson said, that there are legal ways to communicate, and so we'll keep doing that. But definitely we can look into posting, doing a social media blast that, hey, Planning Commission is tonight, check out the agenda here.
I don't have any suggestions or solutions, I'm just bringing it up.
Yep.
That I think there's a opportunity that we may be losing out on.
Sounds good. Okay, no questions on one? So just an overview of section 2 then, is a site plan and a special use permit are the exact same permit packets. A special use permit though requires a public hearing. So in order to make sure that, because a lot of communities, what they'll do is they'll say, apply for your site plan first, but if you're in that special use permit category on the land use table, then you have to come before the Planning Commission and the Town Board of Trustees and ask for a special use permit on top of your site plan. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of duplicative and expensive effort on the part of an applicant. The town of Berthoud recognizes that they actually are two separate application processes. However, the model land use code that DOLA published several decades ago was still under, excuse me, that old model. And so some of that language is still in here. So what we did is we just cleaned it up. You'll see some of the application materials, the discussion on the hydrozones, the plant materials, the landscape plan, the irrigation plan, all of that got transferred over here to the special use permit process as well. So we just wanted to make sure, same application, but you just get to go to a hearing.
Get to.
Thank you. I did notice that the word conditional is still in a few places.
Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah, so I'm trying, and then because a special use permit can be approved, it can be denied, and it can be approved with conditions. So I will do a better scrub, and between now and town trustees in 2 weeks, I will find all of those references to conditional and strike those out.
Yeah, just look under B on page 4.
Yeah.
I can tell you where they are.
Okay.
One at the bottom, page 5.
Oh boy,
You can tell I read regs
I was
all
gonna
day long.
that's great. Yes, so I will find all of those and make sure that we strike all conditional. Now, we won't strike conditions, but we'll strike conditional permit and make them special use permits because they are special on top of the site plans. They're above and beyond a site plan, but they can be conditionally approved.
Well, that's a question that I was gonna ask about because I know at one point, and I can't remember what issue it was, we were talking a couple of years ago about a special use permit, and I had asked about whether we could place certain types of conditions on it. I was told typically that wasn't something that we would do. On the plan commission I was on in Fishers, Indiana, we did that several times. So I was really confused by that, so we can do it.
You can, yes, you can, and in fact, you did the
Right.
last time we had a meeting,
Yes.
you required additional information regarding the traffic impact study from West Side Crossing. They got it to me 5 minutes before the deadline. The engineering team was on standby. They reviewed it so that they could continue and go to the hearing, and that I'll bring that up in staff report, what happened with that hearing on Tuesday.
Could we do for example, could we do a condition that's a little bit more stringent and say something like, this is approved so long as the owner the owner of the land is the same, or so long as there's no variance from this particular use.
So we're going to start having development standards that you will start seeing in the staff report. And those development standards, the first one will say, approval of this plan may be a vested property right. So land use applications stay with the property, they don't
Ends with
go
the
with the
land.
property owner. So that would be development standard 1. Development standard 2 is any change to what's been approved may necessitate an amendment. Item number 3 will be adherence to the dark sky standards. Item number 4 is you shall maintain compliance with your stormwater management plan. So we have a list of about 6 new development standards that will go on every plat that gets recorded. And the property owner signs that saying that they know that they have to adhere to that. Then there will be some site-specific standards such as the right to farm covenant, other items that are only unique to that particular land use application. And so we're going to start strengthening that more. Again, it's an agreement. We've made the decision we're going to allow a certain type of use to come into Berthoud. They're making an agreement saying we will adhere to this agreement. And if they break any of those development standards, that could be cause for revocation of their permits.
Well, let me ask about that then. You're basically saying one of those items would be that this particular special use runs with the land. So would then whatever they agree to, would that be something that would be filed and recorded along with that? Okay, so it would be recorded, good.
Yep, it will be recorded. It would be picked up in title work. And if there was a development agreement that is entered into between the town, that's going to be recorded as well. Because then for future staff, they're going to know what was the approved and agreed upon plan. And there will be no questions.
Because I wondered about that because, like I said, in actually both of the planning commissions I was on before this, we always recorded those special conditions. Even when sometimes we would ask that it not run with the land for some reason, but we did, we made sure that even that was recorded. So I wondered about that.
So you can have conditional approval on special use permits. They have to still fit within the confines of the code. But let's say that you had a land use hearing for a very heavy industrial operation. And there was a high concentration of neighbors to the east. There was another haul route opportunity which would avoid those neighbors to the east. The applicant said, you know what? There's been a lot of concern about dust being generated on this unpaved road with 100 residents to the east. We're going to come up with a new haul route that will make sure that we're on paved roads and we don't go in front of these residents. So that could be a condition that is negotiated during a land use hearing. I like to encourage applicants to have meetings with their neighbors before they even submit an application to the town, just so that concerns like that are mitigated before the application is reviewed. But that's exactly something that you could do. But it has to be relevant based on the land use code and not just something that would be arbitrary. Yeah, but that is your right, and what you did last time was great. Yep, okay, so any questions on 2? And again, with the special use permit application, there wasn't a lot of substance to that to begin with, so we added substance. All right, moving forward with section 3. The state of Colorado has changed regulations regarding home childcare facilities, and that they now are to not be greater than 12 children. Our code read 6 children for a small care facility or childcare home, and then we had a large childcare home for 7 to 12 children. The state now has said that 12 children is what they're doing, and that they passed legislation, I believe last year or the year before, that said communities cannot regulate a childcare home any different than it would just a standard residence. And so I developed this talking with some inspectors for the childcare home industry, and this is a very simple change.
Was that done largely because of the kind of lack of childcare that's available?
You know, I don't know
More kids
why.
in there.
I don't know why, but I'm making an assumption that that is just to offer more capacity for care
Yeah.
and to offer greater flexibility and reduce costs for the home care provider.
Gotcha.
Okay, any questions on that?
No.
Alright, going forward to item number 4. This isn't in the land use code, but it is related to crematoriums and disposal of deceased animals. So right now in section 18.4.15, it states that if an animal dies in town, that somebody has to remove it from the town to be buried. And we're just indicating here that it doesn't have to be removed from the town, that there are methods of taking care of that body after death. That either we have a crematorium or we don't want to have a large animal disposal facility in the town of Berthoud, but an animal doesn't have to leave Berthoud for final disposal. All right, any questions about that? All right, section 5, I know this might be a big one for you all, but there were 2 definitions that were conjoined, and we are just proposing to separate those 2 definitions. In and integrate are 2 separate words. And so then in
Can
section
we discuss this?
Okay, I'm trying to go fast. In section 6, so this is something that we have been working with a lot in the town of Berthoud. The state of Colorado is aware that there are a lot of small home builders in Berthoud that are in violation of their stormwater management practices on lots in Berthoud. So I sent out a courtesy email to a lot of developers and home builders, just letting them know the state's aware we have a problem. Clean up your sites because they're coming. And so I let everybody know, hey, be careful. There are a lot, actually in Heron Lakes has a lot of those violators. So what we are doing here is we are just memorializing, hey, these are standard best practices. This is how you need to operate, and we're just clarifying those expectations.
There's a lot of controversy in the neighborhood right now around bed and breakfast.
Oh, I know, yes.
Yeah, they're trying to say it's on the developer to enforce it or the city, and it's just, I've seen, there was a board meeting yesterday of the metro districts, and it didn't seem like it was actually resolved, so.
No, and we can talk about that later. We have a new policy statement that we have developed to try to communicate, so.
It falls kind of in the right ends, and I mean, that was what was brought up, the definition of.
Yes, and that's why we recognize that the 2 definitions defined in and integrate needed to be separated because we were developing our policy on that, and that's where that one was caught.
I have another question on section 6. Are we on section 6?
Yeah.
Just the, again, I'm speaking personal experience, just unbelievable amount of trash. You know, there's hundreds of homes being built and it's windy in Colorado, and my trees literally look like they were TV'd. I mean, if I showed you pictures, you go, that didn't happen naturally, it did. But I just, again, it comes back to enforcement, right? I mean, that seems to be really, and we're not a big town, and we don't have unlimited resources, but the enforcement of so many things, I'm not pointing fingers or blaming, it just seems like we're not able to enforce a lot of this stuff.
I would love to know after the hearing your address and if you think you believe where the debris may be coming from, it can be dealt with.
I sit on the reservoir and there was so much trash all along the back. I mean, it's, again, I'm not,
There was stuff.
it is what it is. I mean, it's gonna happen. There's hundreds and hundreds of homes under construction. And so you're gonna get stuff. And I think the developer also, they were just charging $10,000 per lot as a deposit for the builders because they couldn't get them to enforce a lot of this stuff, so.
Yep, so there are several large subdivisions that are oftentimes you need to use a lot when you're doing your clearing and grubbing and when you're holding some of the topsoil for replacement, and even with construction materials, some of the extra Tyvek and shingles and things like that, they put it somewhere and they collect it, and then once a week they haul it away. But especially this past spring, it was really windy in Berthoud and towards the end of winter, very, very windy, and a lot of the contractors and developers weren't doing a very good job controlling that blowing. And so this strengthens the best management practices that are required to keep a construction site better under
And
control.
then you could fine them, right? I mean, that's part of
Yes.
the process.
Yep.
The other thing is, again, I'm sorry for going on, but it was such a wet season too. The big heavy trucks would drive onto the lots and they would sink down 3 and 4 feet with 10 tires and wheels, and then they drive out on the road.
Yep.
And I mean, almost a safety hazard, so it was so much
Yep, and then that
mud, dirt.
then that washes into our stormwater system and becomes sediment in the stormwater system, and so
Yeah.
tracking control is a requirement so that you lose some of that stuff on the tires before you even get on a public street. So Mark Spalding is with Baseline, and he is our lead construction inspector, and he will have a pre-construction meeting before anybody starts a project. And these standards, he helped me write them. So he will be going over these now, and these standards just strengthen and give him a little bit more teeth to say, this is required in the code. This also reflects the construction standards and specifications. You will do this. And that is something that will be a development standard on the plat, as well as you shall adhere to best management practices for stormwater quality and construction site
Great
maintenance.
point. And then like vegetation management, I mean, if a builder owns a lot and it's got 5-foot weeds on the whole lot, I would think they're in violation.
Yeah, then they get to know Teresa Morgan, our code compliance officer, really well, and get to know Mark Spalding really well. So, but if anybody has a complaint, you let us know. If anybody has a complaint about staff, we also wanna know.
Again, speaking of the lot next to me, all summer, 4 or 5 foot,
Okay.
the whole entire lot. So, but and I'm not, I'm not asking for any special treatment, I'm just,
No, you are, anybody here, you are a member of the community, call me outside of a planning commission meeting and ask me questions, and we'll try to get you help right away. Yeah, as a member of the community, anybody is afforded that. Okay, any questions on 6? Alrighty. That's it.
wait, there's a 7.
Is there a 7?
Dark
There's a
sky,
7.
Yeah.
I think it's just dark
Whoa.
sky.
There's dark sky.
Yeah.
Favorite stuff.
truly.
Yes, so yes, sign design. Yes, thank you. So on this one, again, this is reflective back to the comprehensive plan. It's reflective back to the international dark sky standards. There are some things in this code that were contradictory to the vision and contradictory to dark sky standards. So, one of the items is that signs moving forward, once this passes, cannot be internally illuminated. Also, in item F, electronic signs were defined, however, they were on the prohibited list. So why do we define something that's prohibited? I've had a lot of calls these past 6 months asking if somebody can have an electronic messaging sign or a great big, flashing sign. And they said, but it's in your code. And I've had to tell them, yes, it's defined in the code, however, I don't have a mechanism to approve it. So that's an inconsistency and it kind of sets up for conflict. So I'd like to avoid
How
that.
about Christmas decorations, seasonal decorations, how does that overlay with dark sky requirements?
So funny that you should ask. Looking at our dark sky section of the code, that will be coming to you again. And Christmas decorations are actually something that the International Dark Sky Association would like us to include. And there will be lumen limits on how much can be put out, as well as the duration of having the decorations up.
That won't be retroactive though, that would be for, I guess, for example, let's say that there was a house in a neighborhood. And
My house.
and they invested, I would presume is a decent chunk of change to have permanent lights installed, and then you can change them to green for St. Patrick's Day, or red for Christmas, or whatever you want. If they were above the lumen count, would this affect them because they already had it, or
They'd have
would
to
it?
grant.
Well, that's a future code.
Yeah.
And I honestly, at 2:00 this afternoon, I had my first meeting.
Okay.
So I don't know yet.
And that would supersede developers' rules, because again, this was brought up, it was a pretty hot topic yesterday.
Oh, okay, good to know.
And they said there's something like, I forget the number, but it was like, there's more than 100 holidays actually. And so if somebody wants to celebrate, then essentially 365 negative lights, they could have their house lit up.
People,
Yeah.
people do Halloween, they do all sorts of So, so that'll probably not be very popular, I think, if you.
Well,
people are gonna
I
like-
don't know, and I know that 1 lumen, I learned this today, 1 lumen is equivalent to 1 birthday candle 1 foot away from you. So that is a lumen, is a
Candlelight is
birthday
also a
candle.
terminology for lighting, I can.
Yeah, like foot candles.
Foot candles, exactly.
Yeah, you're 1 foot
Exactly.
away from the candle.
Right.
So 1 lumen is 1 birthday candle 1 foot away. So on all development plans, we ask for a photometric study to make sure that the foot candles don't trespass outside the property boundary. All right. So no more electronic signs, and so I just deleted everything under electronic signage.
So what I am under A, design, did you have a question, so I didn't wonder.
Oh, I do have a question, but
I do too,
this
go
is a
ahead.
general inquiry about our quest for dark sky designation. I was just wondering where we were at, but that can be at the end.
I have to tell you, our neighborhood is pretty aggressive on it.
Yeah.
I mean, they have light Nazis that drive around.
Well, you have
Don't
to,
record
right?
that.
It's part of
On golf carts with legal pads, and they make people turn their lights on, and the guy next to me, he didn't have a builder, he built his own home. And I said, I mean, he has so many LED lights, I go, we could play basketball at midnight on your driveway, it's so bright, I go, they're gonna talk to you about it.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
They're pretty, even like, you can't have lights coming out of the ground shining up on your trees and stuff.
Right,
It's-
right.
And I was one of those people originally like, oh, come on, and now I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
It really, really does make a difference.
It does.
Yep, so we are, Brian Du Bois, he is working with the International Dark Sky Association on code amendments. They have reviewed our code, they've suggested some amendments, and he and I met today to start talking about, how to write code and how to get them in a format to present to you.
under A, under design,
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's by design, no pun intended, but it seems weak. Some of the wording is, encouraged, and then I see positive contribution to the general appearance of the street. That seems so subjective, it has no teeth to it.
So I'm gonna let you know, our sign code right now needs a lot of scrubbing. And with the budget approval on Tuesday evening, I have a consultant that is going to be helping me improve the overall sign code. These are just some very immediate fixes, was for the illumination for dark sky compliance. But I'm glad that you brought that up because our entire sign code needs a good scrub,
Are
Same
we
thing,
referring
sorry,
to the commercial signs as well?
all signs.
That was just updated like
Um,
3 years ago?
So there's been a lot of Supreme Court cases about content neutrality, and our code is not content neutral. And so there's a lot of scrubbing that the sign code will need in order to comply with the Reed decision on signs.
Oh,
So-
but even number 2, it says proportionate, and that's not a hard number, a lot of, I know towns, municipalities, whatever, they'll allow so many inches of sign on the building, and this sounds like it's very general, but.
Right, and we
something
have that. This is just a section, this is just a sampling of our sign
Okay.
code to represent what we're proposing to change. But we do have exactly that. We have, if you are in the Mountain Avenue Overlay District, your sign cannot exceed X number of square footage.
Right.
And we have a lot of great details, we just need to get it scrubbed. Yep, so this just represents the
Great.
portions that are dark sky.
Yeah, we've
Issues.
actually turned down signs because of all those regulations, or because of the overlay plan.
I have a question about one particular section. It's the one that's 30-7-105 prohibited signs.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not sure I understand A1. It says flashing, rotating, blinking or moving signs, annotated signs, signs with moving, rotating or flashing lights, or signs that create the illusion of movement, except for time and temperature devices. And signs which convey a static digital message, such as a price sign at fueling stations. So what you're saying is that there's 2 exceptions to what you're prohibiting there. But it doesn't read right to me, and I think it could get misconstrued. I think it needs to say something like, except for time and temperature devices and except for signs with which convey, because otherwise, it just doesn't read well to me.
Can you please tell me what page that's on?
Is it 13?
If it's time, it's
At the
gonna move, right?
Except for time and temperature devices and except for.
I think it would be clear if it said and except for signs, because again, you're saying these are things that are not prohibited.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you for that clarification. So when you make a motion tonight, if you move to approve, please reference 30-7-105A1 with the addition of except for in there, and that can then go on to the town trustees. Because again, once something leaves you all, staff does not change. We represent you then at the town trustees meeting and what you said. Thank you for catching that,
No problem.
because it's all for clarity, make it easy. It's easier when things are clear, then we don't have to have any guesswork, no explaining, no arguments.
Oh, believe me, since I read regs all day, like today, I had to call 3 different regulators, different states, and say, this is what it says, is this what you really mean? So yeah, I'm sensitive to this.
So that completes the first round of code changes that will come before you. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have and
Do our public
probably
hearing.
open the public hearing.
Do we have any more questions? All right, so with that, I will open the public hearing. And those of you who would like to speak, please come to the lectern and state your name and address or on Zoom. And I don't see anyone, so with that, I will close the public hearing. Great, so do we have a motion? We'll entertain a motion.
Someone who wrote down the change. Oh, yeah, I did. I move to forward a recommendation of approval of the proposed changes to titles 30 and 18 of the Berthoud Municipal Code. This recommendation of approval is outlined in the attached ordinance 1322/2013 and includes supporting information in the ordinance attachment. I move to forward this recommendation with the condition that the phrase except for is added to section 30-7-105A.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk Rieger, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Secretary Van Bentham,
Yes.
Commissioner Feldbush,
Yes.
Commissioner Semadalis,
Yes.
Commissioner Wing,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kurtz,
Yes.
Chairperson Anderson.
Yes. With that, motion is unanimous. Okay, report
Nice
from
job. Nice
staff.
job on the work and the presentation.
Mhm.
Yes, that was wonderful.
Let's excite, again, I love writing.
You and I need to talk. All right, so report from staff, will you be able to tell us about any of what the town board did from some of the things that we did 2 weeks ago?
Of course, yes. So regarding the Ludlow Sliver annexation, that was just too close to go, we didn't have enough hearing time between hearing dates to get that on the town board of trustees hearing on this past Tuesday. So that is going in a couple weeks, and so I'll keep you posted on that. As far as West Side Crossing, and I don't have all the details, but the memo was provided per your direction to our engineering team. They reviewed it, they found it to be compliant, and so the planning, town board of trustees did approve the preliminary plat. And I'm waiting to get a copy of the motion because they may have also included another condition that there be a Transport bus stop at that location, or that they investigate that. So Transport has already been added to our referral list as an outcome, and we know that CDOT or some of the transportation districts were a referral agency, but NOAA contacted the director of Transport or the coordinator, and so we now have their contact and they will directly receive referral. But it was approved, and then next step will be to get that recorded. It will come to Chairwoman Anderson or Chairperson Anderson to execute the preliminary plat. It will get recorded, and then when they will submit a final plat, that will come before you all, and they will get to do a development agreement. So those are next steps for that one. And then I would like to formally introduce Terry Rieger. Terry is our planning permit technician. This is a brand new position for the town of Berthoud. Terry will be sending you packets. She will be coordinating all of your hearings. She will also be in charge of sign permits. She's already done a phenomenal job at addressing a lot of new lots that have been created in the town of Berthoud. She will be in charge of the architectural review and block diversity programs for the town of Berthoud as well. So, and lots of other things. She is also helping us, we have a very large file room in the basement with a lot of old planning documents as well as building permits. And Terry is going through and starting to digitize all of our old documents. So they will now be available online, and the end goal would be to have a repository that anybody can click on a parcel on GIS, and it would upload the annexation, the change of zone, the subdivision, site plan, all of that.
Wow.
So that's a long range goal, maybe 5 years out, but we can't get there unless we start. And so Terry is enabling that to start, and then Jonathan, who you know is doing is the project manager for the building permit side of that project.
Officially welcome.
Yes, so we're very happy to have Terry, and Terry, would you like to talk about what you did in Pasadena?
I worked for the Old Pasadena Management District, which was a downtown development authority. We were in charge of the security down there. We also created a food festival that was in conjunction right around the same time as the Rose Parade and the big game. And yeah, I worked closely with a lot of the stakeholders in the city, and it was a very exciting job. Busy, big busy job.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Will she be able to provide input to the potential DDA here?
Maybe.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we of course don't want to lose her.
Oh,
So thanks
sorry.
for-
I'm so sorry. Already coaching.
So yes, we are in the infant stages of thinking about having a DDA. So of course, we would love to have Terry be a part of that.
That's great.
And then just to let you know, we have a lot of land use applications that are in development review. They're just, they progress at their own speed, and there are different things that the developers have to address. So they're not quite ready to get to you. We might have one to come to you on September 14th, which is your next meeting, but it might not happen. So if that doesn't happen, you might actually be able to take a break and not have a meeting that night. So that would be a well-deserved break for you all. So upcoming code changes, the next round you will see at the end of September are going to be the telecommunications code, so that we can come into, we need to update ours. And Ken Fellman is a state-renowned attorney that is an expert on telecommunications, and he has been helping us write that code. There will also be some other code cleanup stuff like we did tonight. You will also be seeing, we developed landscape guidelines as an outcome to the comprehensive plan. And we took a tour. We're going to be upping those draft guidelines and giving people like a sample maintenance plan for natural areas, a sample maintenance plan for commercial property, some do this, don't do that, precedent images. So that will be coming to you then on round 3 with some other code cleanup. And then round 4 will be the dark sky and some other code cleanup. I think round 2 and 3 definitely can get to you this year. Round 4 might straddle 2023-24. So, and then the sign code. I forgot all about that one. Yes, the sign code, that's a big one. Sign code, and then with that, the same consultant that helped with the comprehensive plan is going to be going through our code then and seeing where does our code not reflect the vision and values, and we'll be bringing that to you at the same time as the sign code.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's it.
That's like a lot of code.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I'm sorry, you completed your report? Okay. Commissioners, is there anything that you want to announce?
I guess I had a question. It doesn't have to be like a long answer, but just with, interest rates and, kind of all the housing issues in Colorado, is Berthoud, I think there was like a slight dip, say like 9 to 10 months ago with like, building permits and issuance and all that kind of stuff. Has there been a rebound, or is it kind of flattened out? I'm just kind of curious like where we stand.
Berthoud has been incredibly busy the past few months with residential building permits, and then we also have had some commercial projects that have been approved, and they're coming in for their building permits now as well. I have heard that there have, with commercial loans, I'm not a banking expert at all. I just listen to what people say, that there have been changes in the commercial lending industry that have made it a little bit more difficult for commercial projects to get funding. But those individuals that,
It's like anecdotal, like you're.
yeah, yes, yeah.
I can speak to that, but you're exactly right. Instead of essentially putting 20% down on the loan they're getting now, you need 30 or 40.
Oh, wow.
And when you're talking millions of dollars,
Right.
it's a difference between you starting a development or holding off another years. And then with residential, I would expect you guys are probably seeing applications stay pretty level because that is the inventory moving because most builders are willing to buy down your interest rates and offer those incentives
Right.
versus resales, you don't get that.
Mhm.
So it's kind of the affordable pocket right now.
Awesome. Yeah, Laura has been especially busy in the building division she does all of our residential permits.
I don't know what the county road is that runs parallel to 287, but it's west of it, runs parallel to the mountains, but it's just west of us. I drove that road yesterday, and it's I don't know if they're 5 or 10 acre lots. There was like 14 for sale signs on homes. There was a cluster of 6, and then all along there. I mean, and that it didn't look like that a year ago when I drove that. So I don't know. I mean, it's you drive it and you look at it, you go, something's going on.
Yeah,
It's-
that
it's-
is interesting.
It is. It's very peculiar.
It's probably outside our growth management area, just outside.
It was just an observation. I
Yeah,
could
yeah, yeah.
comment that,
Yeah.
Interesting.
yeah.
If the inventory that's around 1.5 million and above is basically not moving. So that might be why you're noticing the signs are staying up longer.
Right.
Cause it's just not moving.
Even
as
in
quickly.
my neighborhood, they would, it'd be like 48 hours, and now we've got quite a few that are just sitting.
Thanks, yeah, I was just kinda curious for update on where we're at, so.
Anything else,
Good.
folks?
Good.
If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
We don't have to do it, but we can. All right, so we're adjourned.
Alright.
Yay.
Nice work, yeah.
Good job, Nick.
Oh, don't forget to give these to Terry, folks.
Your permission slip.
So,
Permission slips.
do we have to look up when we started?
No, we'll do our best to fill that in.
I just
got the year,
that's
the
good.
Yes, I just can't.
The rest of Nick will see him.